American of people who had this Scots-Irish lineage, and some people claim that they had the best aspects of English culture and Americanness. But by the late 1800s, that had changed to this. Why would that be? Well, that's what we're going to look at. And here are some of the things that I just mentioned. Hillbillies, ignorant and inferior, the other, sometimes in the past presented as the best of the U.S., but it all comes down to this line right here. This stereotype started to appear in the late 1800s during this New South period, when a lot of investors from the North were coming into the area trying to open it up for coal mining or for the lumber, I guess that timber, anyway, for the timber industry. And a lot of people in southern Appalachia were not real receptive to strangers, to outsiders, not real eager to sell their land or to sell the mineral rights or the timber rights to their land, sometimes particularly to Northerners as a result of that particular conflict that we're all aware of. And so, before very long, you started seeing Southern Appalachians not being presented as the descendants of Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone, but rather as being these very stupid, uneducated, ignorant, lazy, stubborn people, as an other, basically as the least white of the white people, you might almost say. And by presenting them in that fashion as an other, as inferior, it's a lot easier to take that next step and say because they're inferior and because they're stupid and because they're backward, then it's okay to make their decisions for them because they don't know what's best. And that is indeed what people started doing. And that is where this image started to develop. They weren't initially called hillbillies. That really started in the 1920s during what is known as the Scopes Monkey Trial in Dayton, Tennessee, that you're probably familiar with, which was kind of a big press circus. There were people from all around the country came down to Dayton, Tennessee, following the events of this trial, and writing reports, sending it back to their newspapers back home. In particular, there was one writer, a very famous writer, a very good writer, named H.L. Mencken, and he was from New York. And in New York, I'm going to go back to this Appalachia map. In New York, there was a term that was used to apply to those hill people in upstate New York. They called them hillbillies. That was actually a New York term. So this New Yorker in Dayton, Tennessee in the 1920s is writing back every day about these ignorant hillbillies. And it caught on. It caught on and it stuck. By the end of the 1920s, you were already starting to see that common stereotype being presented along with the terminology hillbilly. So, you may have guessed, I'm not real fond of the term personally. I do take it personally. I do want to point out these couple of examples. These are examples wherein the stereotype has a kind of sort of positive spin to it. You may have seen the Beverly Hillbillies. Very rarely when I ask, has anyone ever seen No Time for Sergeants, which is what made Andy Griffith famous in the 1950s. In films like this, stories like this, the hillbillies are presented as not necessarily immoral, that they have a sort of morality that is superior to the city slickers who are trying to take advantage of them. And they outwit the city slickers in the long run. So that is a kind of a positive spin, but at the same time, they're still being presented as idiots with all the stereotypes that go along with it. Andy Griffith, in particular, more famous for the TV show he had. Whenever I ask students here in Tennessee, how many of you like the Andy Griffith show? Almost everybody raises their hand. I asked that in Illinois, and no one even knew what I was talking about. So it's a Southern thing. I always liked the Andy Griffith show which is set in western North Carolina in Appalachia, because it felt like they were laughing with us instead of laughing at us. Nonetheless, the stereotype, as I said, persists. And if you've watched any reality television the last couple of years, you have seen no end of rednecks and hillbillies. Honey Boo Boo is the modern embodiment of the Beverly Hillbillies. And most Americans think it's hilarious and perfectly fine to do. So